All right. Welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. It's been a while since we did one, and I got a special guest here with me to help me out on this one, Mr. Chris Kiebzak. Welcome.
How we doing, everybody?
All right. So we got on the bill here, Dokken. We're going to do some rocking with Dokken here. And we've been trying to get this video done now for like 3 months, it seems like, but here we
Yeah,
are finally.
here we are.
All right. That makes it even more sweeter to get it rolling and in the books here. So obviously Dawkins been around since the early 80s. The classic lineup of George Lynch on guitar, Don on vocals, Mick Brown on drums, and of course Jeff Pilson on bass. They recorded one, two, three, four albums all together, and then Reb Beach came in to replace Mr. Lynch for Erase the Slate.
Right.
And then it's pretty much been John Norm or John Levin on guitar the rest of the way. Um, well, there was Dysfunctional and Shadow Life. That's so those are two. I guess I shouldn't discount them because they were with the original lineup there. But those two albums obviously have a lot of dysfunctionality between them. So,
Yeah.
but we'll get rolling here. We're going to do them two at a time. So, yeah, go ahead and let's start off with our number 12 and number 11, and then we'll get rolling.
All right. So my number 12 to me is going to be the ninth studio album the band put out, which is 2004's Hell to Pay. Um, didn't really, I know, like, especially upon, listening to them and doing research, I know that people sort of look at this as like one of the better releases in that time frame. But for me, really doesn't have too much good stuff besides I like Escape. I like Haunted was good, and The Last Goodbye I thought was a really good song. But other than that, yeah, the album doesn't really speak a lot to me. And it just sort of hangs there right at the end. So I figured out of all the decent songs throughout this 12 album discography, I had to put Hell to Pay at the end there. And then my number 11, I'm going to go to the latest record, 2023's Heaven Comes Down. Has some cool riffs. Uh, I like where they're going. I wish they went in a decent or in a different direction a little bit to get something new when we're this late in the game and Dokken releases. And obviously, the members and who are on this records really have nothing to do with Dokken anymore. So, besides Don. So looking at it like a Don solo album, I do enjoy it. But as far as Dokken's discography, I got to put the last record at number 11.
That's saying something because there's a couple albums there that most people would probably have even worse off than that one. But we'll see what the rest of the list pertains. I know my list is a lot different already right off the bat. I got what I feel are my two weakest choices are coming up right now. Number 12. I'm going with probably the album that most people would have picked as their worst favorite, and that's Shadow Life. This album blows. It sucks. It's gay. I just hate it. I tried listening to it over and over, and I just want to beat my head against the wall or shoot myself. But Shadow Life, believe it or not, I don't know how. It actually peaked at number 146. I don't know how or why, but it's a far cry from Dokken, in my estimation. They're trying to be grunge and trying to fit in. 1998, they did it like 6 years too late. So that's my take on Shadow Life. I just can't stand the album, and that's always going to be my least favorite Dokken album by a mile. Number 11 is another one that, I hate to put it so far down the list, but it really isn't that good. And that's why it's there. And we're talking about the second last Dokken album, 2012. We're talking Broken Bones. Um, yeah, it peaked at number 173. The last Dokken album to make the charts in any capacity. And I don't know. This is another one where I'm just not a big fan of. If I have to pick probably what my favorite song off this album was, I would have to say probably The Victim of the Crime is that or Fade Away are the two songs that I thought that, were decent enough, but other than that, the rest of the album is just kind of mediocre, nothing to write
Right.
home about. So that's what I got for Broken Bones, number 11. And
Gotcha.
let's see what you got for 10 and 9.
All right, so 10, and this is an album that you mentioned, and it was your last album on the list, Shadow Life. You mentioned something interesting about how you can't understand how it did as decent as it did. I blame a lot of that with my age range in the late 90s as a teenager and young adult, looking into Metal Edge and Hit Parader. Metal Edge especially did a really, really good job at promoting new releases from any and all bands, whether they were doing well at the time or they were on their downfall, similar to Dokken. And I remember Shadow Life. I probably have some pictures in this room um, from Metal Edge that have the Shadow Life thing on it, but just absolutely dug it down people's throats in promoting it, and I think that's why it did so well. Just before you can just go online and listen to it
Hmm.
still. So I think people were like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get this record." Everyone's saying classic Dokken sounds like classic Dokken, sounded nothing like classic Dokken, just a shit record. I should have put it last, but there was two or three saving graces, not even really worth mentioning at this point because again, the album is sort of a sack of shit. But again, I think the time period that it was released is why it did well. These bands were starting to come out of the woodwork again. I mean, we were right before this was right before Poison reunited, and obviously when Dokken got their second wind after that point, and all these other bands that were touring with them. So I definitely think Shadow Life had a lot of ability to be a great record, but the songs just blow. So,
Even Don doesn't like it. He always, if
oh,
it
I
ever
know.
gets brought up in the interviews, he goes off on it himself. He was kind of forced to make that album, and that was something he did not want to do. So at least, hey, at least a bigger man admits it, you know?
Right, but and you'll see later in my list though that just because these clunkers were released doesn't mean that really good stuff didn't come to follow after
Oh yeah.
in this journey. So it's interesting that Shadow Life, as much promotion as it got, as sort of sunk the way it did, but it's understandable how it did. So for my number, what am I on? Nine.
Yep.
I'm going with 2007's A Lightning Strikes Again. Again, this is where it sort of starts, the songs start getting better, especially for that time period. But decent record. It was released on Rhino in the US, which again is still a label, especially in that time period, that was really keeping these bands afloat and being able to pay for stuff and sort of be like the old school label. So I always thought that was a really good thing. And then there's some really good the opening track, Standing on the Outside, I thought was great. Underrated track. And I really liked Point of No Return and Disease, which Mick Brown I believe wrote. Just those songs are really good and well written and sort of throwbacks to Dawkins. So for number nine, Lightning Strikes Again.
All right. My number 10 is Lightning Strikes Again.
Oh, really? Cool.
Peaked at number 133. Yeah, this is another weaker mention of the catalog here. Um, Never came out till 2008. It was actually supposed to come out in late 2007, but it got pushed back.
Right.
But yeah, this album, I heard the first thing I think I remember off of this one was Standing on the Outside. Sounded all right. Give Me a Reason is okay. I remember. So I mean, it does have a couple good songs on it that something more than I can say about than Shadow Life.
Right.
But of the post George Lynch era, it's just one of the weaker albums, unfortunately, that we have here. But we do have a couple good ones coming up soon. Number 9, um, peaked at number 47, so it was our last time in the top 50 on the Billboard charts. Even during the middle of grunge, they managed to put an album on the charts. This was released on the Columbia Records label, so Columbia took a chance on them, and we came up with Dysfunctional. And the album title definitely lives up to its name. It's quite a dysfunctional album. It kind of describes the band to a T at that moment in time because, even though they were able to regroup and make the album, all was not well within the band. There was no harmony. Everybody was at each other's throats, and it was just not a good time. They kind of like they broke it off back in like '88 after the Monsters of Rock, and then
Right.
this was their first release back into the big picture following Back for the Attack. So they went 7 years between albums. But like I said, to come in at number 47 isn't actually too bad, all things considered. This album actually charted higher than Tooth and Nail, believe it or not. So that's it's hard to believe, but
Right.
obviously different times, different things going on here. So I got Dysfunctional here. I got a couple good songs I want to mention real quick about this one here, and that is going to be none other than The Maze. I like that song a lot. Nothing Left to Say is okay, but probably the best song on the album, unfortunately, is a cover song, but I like it. From the beginning, they did a great job on that song.
Right.
So I always felt that that was one of the better songs on the album. Um, Not a big fan of the song that Don always seems to play in concert all the time, even to this day. Too High to Fly. I've just never gotten into that song. It's just kind
Yeah,
of
what's up with
boring.
that? Why does he choose to play that? Do you know? You have any
I
info
don't
on
know.
that?
He likes it, I guess. He really likes the lyrics, and I just never got into the song. And there's so many better Dokken songs that I can see wanting to see him play live than this one. But for some reason, it's a special song to him, which everybody has their own special songs. What you feel is special may not be the same as what other people feel, and vice versa. You know how it goes.
Right.
But for some reason, he's always stuck to his guns on that song. I'm just kind of surprised myself because I just don't see the attraction to the song myself. But anyhow, that's where I got Dysfunctional at number 9, and then number
Cool.
10 was Lightning Strikes Again, and you got 8 and 7 coming up. What do we got for 8?
Yeah. So eight, I have 2012's Broken Bones. I think, yeah, you already had this one listed a little bit lower,
Yep.
but I actually really like this one. I think Best of Me is a good song. I like Waterfall. I thought the title track is really good. The second song on the album kicks off really good with Empire. A little bit heavier, I feel, than the ones before it at that time. And I think they were sort of trying to go more to an actual Dokken feel. They weren't really going outside of the box, I feel, on that record too much. Obviously, it's, my number 8, so the songs aren't that great. But when you put it in with the rest, I really think Broken Bone shines a little bit nearing the middle of the pack here. So, um, and then for my number 7, I have 2002's Long Way Home. Um, Really, I didn't. I know I've heard the album at least twice before, but when I was listening to him again for this, I realized there's some like Little Girl and You. There's some pretty good songs on this record that were overlooked a little bit, and I'm definitely going to be putting it back into constant rotation for myself here when listening to their discography. But that's my number 8 and 7, Broken Bones at 8, Long Way Home at number 7.
Okay. All right. So my number 8 is going to take us back all the way to 2004, and we're talking Hell to Pay, which is the first album to feature Mr. John Levin on guitar. And yeah, I mean this one isn't bad, especially for the first album with Levin. I would say the standout tracks, Don't Bring Me Down, that was the one that I kind of felt, the one that I actually heard. But it seems like as the album gets near the end, I like Letter to Home and is it Can You See or Can't You See? Can You See?
Can You See?
Yeah. I had to
I believe. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
read it.
Yeah.
All right, but those are the ones that stand out to me. Letter to Home, Can You See, and Don't Bring Me Down. Better Off Before is not too bad. So it has more songs that I like on it compared to the ones before it. Um, but we still haven't really started to come into the good spot for me yet with Dokken, but we will very soon here.
Right.
And so that's Hell to Pay. And number 7, I've got the latest release that came out in 2023, Heaven Comes Down. Um, kind of a, considering all the vocal issues Don has and everything, I thought he did a great job on the album. Obviously there's more things you can do in the studio to patch up a bad voice. Um, but besides that, I thought the album was solid. Some of the songs are really good. Nothing that's going to take us back to the under lock and key sector or anything like that. But
Right.
I like Gypsy a lot. I'll Never Give Up. Over the Mountain is cool. And the interesting song is the last one, Santa Fe, where Don kind of talks about moving. He's always lived in California his whole life. Then he ended up moving out to New Mexico. And the song is kind of an autobiographical song, which is pretty cool. But I like Levin's guitar playing on this album. I think these are some of the best. This might be his overall best album, in my estimation,
Sure. I mean, great guitar playing.
with guitar playing. Yeah, I really love it. And yeah, it was good to see us get at least one more Dokken album out of the mix here. And to me, it's hardly far from embarrassing since it's number 7 out of 12 Dokken albums. That's pretty good in my estimation.
Yeah.
So that's what I got. Hell to Pay at 8, Heaven Comes Down at 7, and we've got our top 6.
Well, that's what's interesting too. Like John Levin, pretty much, I feel like he's a big reason why Dokken was able to still release records and be on the up. He's very undercredited for what he did for later Dokken, I feel. So yeah, and that is probably the best album guitar wise. I totally understand why you're saying that. So let's get on to my number 6 and number 5. So my number 6 for me is going to be the first album after they reunited. They reunited in 93, and in 95 they released this record, which is Dysfunctional. Um, I like it. I think it's interesting that the feel of the songs are a little different because you figure Don, Jeff Pilson, and Mick Brown pretty much wrote 90% of this record together. So, obviously having them back together and doing that initial breakup and reunion is awesome. I think there's some great songs on here. Inside Looking Out being the first song on the record is catchy to my ears. I remember hearing it for the first time and saying, "Oh, that's amazing." Obviously, those three being the main contributors in writing this record would sort of have you feel the past aura of what Dokken offered. Other ones I really like is Sweet Chains and Lesser of Two Evils. I thought was an amazing song. And then obviously you have the Emerson Lake and Palmer cover on there from the beginning, which actually turned me on to some Emerson Lake and Palmer back in the day. So um, that's why Dysfunctional, the reunion album from '95, is my number 6. And then number 5, I think might maybe shock you a little bit here, but my number 5 is Breaking the Chains from 1983. Um, Obviously being their first album, when you're a band, especially of this genre, and you release a record as your first album, it's either the best in your catalog or it's a little subpar to the two, three, four, whatever albums coming after it. And I feel they were still in that initial period of figuring out exactly what their niche was. And obviously some amazing, amazing songs and off this record, and the singles, I Can't See You, Young Girls, Breaking the Chains. I mean, it has some decent singles. Breaking the Chains, obviously being, one of my favorite Dokken songs. But again, I feel this album leaves a little more to desire when you listen to it in the rest of the catalog. That's why the debut album is right there. It's in the top 5, but it is number 5 for me.
All right. Well, for me, it's at number 6, Breaking the
Ah, there. Oh,
Chains.
there you go.
So we're
Okay.
thinking kind of similar here.
Yeah,
I
yeah, we're
just,
we're not far.
it's got one phenomenal song on the title track, but there's not a lot after that that really stands out. Felony's cool. I Can't See You, Night Rider, Paris is Burning. That's another one that everybody always likes a lot. That
Yeah,
people
Paris is
mention.
Burning good song.
That's
Yes.
definitely one of the better songs on the album. But overall, like you said, they were in their learning stage, and Breaking the Chains was a great song to help, break them in and get their foot on the ground here, the feet on the ground to get them all up and running. and it's been a song that's always stayed in the Dokken set list ever since day one. But it's just not in the top five albums because once we get into that, this is where after this album, my number five, this is where the albums really start to get decent.
Right.
So for my number five, I am going back to 1999, and we're talking Erase the Slate, the one album with guitarist Reb Beach from Winger and Whitesnake, and Erase the Slate. Believe it or not, never charted. Don't understand why. This is an album that really this was the one right after Shadow Life that put brought these guys back to life here, and obviously they did like a club tour with Great White at the time in '99 after that Poison tour. Great
Right.
White and Dokken alternated opening and closing and did the tour. I got to see it in Baltimore, Maryland, and man, what a great time that was. And I'll tell you one thing, that's got to be the loudest show I ever been to. Just the Dokken part. For some reason, Dokken must have had everything cranked up to 11. Great White opened that night, and they didn't have things tuned up that high at all. So it was really, you really got your ears blasted off at that Dokken show to need to say the least here. But real quick, they have songs I like on Erase the Slate. Obviously, is the title track. Maddest Hatter's cool. They actually played that one the last time I seen them a few years back, which was kind of a surprise. I
Oh,
didn't.
interesting. I didn't really know they grabbed anything out of there anymore.
Yeah,
Cool.
they opened with it. It was really weird. Definitely weird. That was the opening song at Del Lago. But the song that I always gravitate to is the best song on the album, no doubt, Change the World. I just love the lyrics, and it comes right after Erase the Slate, so it's the second song on the album. Wild McBrown gets a vocal credit here on Crazy Mary Goes Round.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, and the album closers always seems to be a good one for me, In Your Honor. Not a big fan of one, the cover from Three Dog Night. I've never really liked their version either. But overall, definitely a much better improvement and, way better than Shadow Life by a mile.
Oh yeah.
Um, and yet this one doesn't chart and Shadow Life did. Can never figured out how things work sometimes.
Yeah.
But that's my number. Well, six was Breaking the Chains and five was Erase the Slate. That's going to bring us down to our top four Dockins.
All right. So number four for me is going to be 1985's Under Lock and Key. Um, Again, not the first Dokken album I heard when I was younger and discovering these bands in my teens, but it is obviously what I feel is one of the best. There's a lot of songs on here that doesn't get much love that should. Jaded Heart, it's really good. The last song, Till the Living End, is great. Obviously, Unchain the Night. In My Dreams, obviously, with how big of a hit that was. And I love Lightning Strikes Again. I think that song is extremely underrated. Um, and they must have liked it too if they named an album like an album after that in the future. But yeah, I think right there under Lock and Key is right above the top five and number four for me. And then number three, you already mentioned this record, but I think it never gets the love it deserved. You already pretty much mentioned all the great songs on the record, but Erase the Slate from '99, I just think is one of the best records they put out, guitar playing wise. Dom's vocals are really on fire. And then obviously you have Reb Beach, who's one of my favorite guitar players since, I first seen him play with Alice Cooper. So yeah, I mean, amazing record. Definitely. And you mentioned something funny about how why it did like why Shadow Life did so much better. And again, I think it's because Metal Edge and these websites and labels and the magazines all tried with Shadow Life to
Hmm.
push down, and as much promotion as they did, the album just wasn't that great. So once people bought it and realized that the magazines are full of shit, they really didn't want to make that same mistake with Erase the Slate. But I do feel like if Erase the Slate was released when Shadow Life was, it may have been a different story, and I don't even think Shadow Life would have existed. if it was for Erase the Slate being earlier. But yeah, just I don't know if I want to say classic sounding Dokken album, but definitely one of the heaviest, and that title track is probably it's definitely in my top two or three favorite Dokken songs. So um just love hearing that riff, and it almost seems like it's off time, so it's a different vibe, almost a more metal vibe. So that's why for number three I got 99's Erase the Slate.
All right. My number four, back to 2002. Going, we're going to take the long way home. This album
Oh,
is the best Dokken album without George Lynch on it.
wow.
And that's got the guitar playing talents of John Norum, who obviously is from Europe. And it's the only album to feature him. And yeah, just Little Girl, I love. Goodbye, My Friend is a great Dokken song. There Was a Time. Uh, yeah, I mean, just a great album. Really got into this one. It was mo most their most consistent release, obviously. Even for me, it beat out Erase the Slate, so I like it even better than that one. So
Wow, yeah, yeah, that is sort of shocking.
just by a little, just by a
Mhm.
little. It didn't beat it by much, but
Oh no, it's obviously very close for you.
oh yeah, yeah, because Erase the Slate was five and Long Way Home's four. But I don't know. I
Right.
think Norum is just he's more of a technical guitarist and the style and tone that he plays. Look at the Europe songs and Rep Beach is more fire like Winger and Whitesnake and not to say that's saying that Norum is better or anything like that, but I just somehow
It's a
always
different vibe. Yeah.
like the Long Way Home. I think the songs are a little bit more commercial friendly too compared to Erase the Slate. So maybe that's another reason why, they tend to stand out more, maybe. I don't know. Anyhow, but that's what I got for that one. And number three, I've got an album that hasn't been mentioned yet. So, other words, we're going back to 1987, Back for the Attack,
There you go.
which I actually got to see these guys live before the album even came out. They opened up for Aerosmith on the Permanent Vacation tour. And at that point, Back for the Attack was not out when I seen them because I saw one of the first few dates on the tour, and the album didn't come out until November. So I saw it like 2 weeks before the album came out. And I think at that time, the only song on the album that was played on MTV was Burning Like a Flame.
Okay.
So that's
So
like
how many songs did they play off the record when you seen them that tour then?
well, I think they only played a few. They played Kiss of Death and I don't even think they played Burning Like a Flame. Oh, they played Dream Warriors.
Of course. Okay. Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
two songs. Yeah. So Dream Warriors was interesting because
Well,
that one
Dream
actually
Warriors was
appears, if
it was
yeah, it's from A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 soundtrack,
right. Yes. Dream Warriors.
and it came out earlier in 87. It was released in February of 1987.
Yeah.
They just decided to include it on the album since they were coming out with the album. So it was just kind of like tacked onto it because it is
Which
the
I think which
last.
I think was smart.
Oh yeah, yeah, I think so too because the
Because
song did.
that still to this day, that them being that movie and that video is still a big part of their career.
Yeah, I think it definitely helped, no doubt about that. Getting back from the attack though, Kiss of Death, great. Prisoner, love it. Standing in the Shadows, Night by Night. I wasn't too. I mean, Burning Like a Flame, I feel isn't even probably one of the. It's probably in the middle of the pack on the album.
Mhm.
I just that Sleepless Night I like. That's another great song on the album. But I wasn't really much of a fan of some of the later songs that were released and played on MTV and played on the radio as a compared to the ones I just mentioned. So I'll leave that up there in case if you want to mention them. Um, yeah, that was the problem with this album too. Burning Like a Flame only hit number 72 on the charts as a single. And other than that, other single they released from the album didn't even hit the charts. Like
Like,
I said, Dream Warriors was already released as a single prior to. That did
sure.
make number 22 on the mainstream charts. And other than that, anything that was released as an actual single just never charted, unfortunately. So there you have that. And that is going to be my number three. Four was Long Way Home. Three was Back for the Attack, leaving us with our top two.
All right. So this one's going to be easy to talk about because you just did, but my number two is Back for the Attack from '87. I wish I could pull it off the wall, but when I was a really young kid, even before I discovered Dokken, I was huge into horror movies and still am. And Nightmare on Elm Street 3 uh, is still to this day my favorite horror movie of all time. And I'll never forget seeing that video on MTV and saying, why is Freddy on MTV? And then seeing Dokken. And that's probably the main reason why I started looking into that band because I was already discovering a lot of glam and hair metal bands from that era. But um, Back for the Attack, very interesting. Of course, they had to throw that song on there in the end, and as they should have. I mean, it was a huge song, and I feel really helped add longevity to their career, especially now. I mean, George Lynch is doing a bunch of through the mail signings. I'm actually thinking about signing my Nightmare on 3 poster that I have signed by Robert Englund. But most of the stuff that you can buy to get signed through this website is Nightmare stuff. So it's very interesting. I mean, it's sort of hand in hand goes with Dokken at this point. But as far as the album Back for the Attack, yeah, some really good songs on here. You mentioned Burning Like a Flame being the only major single. And again, as you said, it's not even close to the best song on the record. I really like Standing in the Shadows. Prisoner is great. Obviously, Kiss of Death opening the album is a great song and definitely followed them for a long way as one of their best songs. So yeah, my number two. And then as a guitar player, I'm usually was never into instrumentals, but hearing Mr. Scary for the first time and thinking, wow, like, this is something that if I learn this, I'll be the guitar player I want to be. And I did, and I learned it. And when I was probably 15 or 16, and it gave me a whole new appreciation for George Lynch's playing and Dokken in general. So number two for me, Back for the Attack. And then my number one, 1984 is Tooth and Nail. Um, can't beat it. I'm not a ballad guy, but Alone Again is one of my favorite songs of all time. I'll never forget hearing that for the first time. Obviously, Tooth and Nail, the title track, that guitar riff. Right from that point, you can see that George and the boys are going to be going a much different direction than what some glam and hair metal was doing at the time. But obviously Into the Fire, and then one that's usually not talked about, Turn on the Action, which is the last song on the record, I think is extremely great. And after, rehearing all these again some of them for the first time in a while, that song is definitely in the top ring of top 5 or 10 Dokken songs for me. So number two, Back for the Attack, and my number one is 1984's Tooth and Nail.
All right, very good. All right, so my number two is going to be the one you just mentioned, Tooth and Nail. It peaked at
We're
number
so close.
49. Yep, peaked at number 49 on the charts, which is interesting because at that time, this is really, I believe out of all the albums, not sure if it's leading the way. They got three platinum albums
Sure.
all in a row, but I'm not sure which one is actually leading the way in sales, but I would almost think it would be Tooth and Nail, you would think. But maybe someday we'll get a clarification on that if any of them ever goes double platinum.
Right.
But this one came out in, like you said, 1984. A lot of good songs on here, and I remember the first song that I ever heard off of it was without a doubt "Alone Again." That was the big song on the radio, MTV. And then I think after that, Just Got Lucky was another big song. Remember that one? That was another great song from the album there. Peaked at number 27 on the US mainstream charts. None of these, well, Alone Again hit number 64 on the regular chart and number 20 on the mainstream.
Right.
But as far as probably the next best song on the album would be Into the Fire, another classic. All these songs we just mentioned, they still played live right up until the last time I've seen him. He's still playing these songs. Into the Fire is definitely not an easy song to sing. You know, you got to give credit for Don for trying to still sing it after all these years because we know his voice isn't quite what it was, but he tries. A couple other songs that I like on this one that stand out. Turn on the Action was okay. It was pretty cool. Bullets to Spare. I love the drumming on that one. Wild Mick really pounds pounds those drums on this song for sure. Very powerful sound and song on Bullets to Spare. And When Heaven Comes Down. That's another kind of big song I think Don always liked because that one was in the set list. I know he played it for sure when he came to the show place. The last time they ever played Buffalo here. Um, so that was a pretty cool song there. So yeah, Tooth and Nail is just a solid run through. You know, I think it's not really a bad song on the album. You know, I'm looking at it right now. I don't see anything that is like a throwaway. Even the instrumental introduction there, Without Warning, before it goes into Tooth and Nail, is awesome. I just love that too. That's what they usually play that over the speaker before Dokken hits the stage.
Right.
I would have liked to seen him actually just play it live. You know, that'd be cool.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so that's what I got for my number two. My number one, I'm going back to Under Lock and Key, the number one album, hit number 32. Um, this album when I first got it, I knew right off the bat that I love this album. And this is another album. I'm looking at it. There's not one bad song on this album. You got a couple five-star songs. I got like Unchain the Night. I've got The Hunter, Slipping Away, just great. Lightning Strikes Again, probably one of the loudest, fastest Dokken songs there is.
Yeah.
It's Not Love, good song. Video was kind of strange how they were playing in the back of a truck. He still gets a lot of heat for that whole situation. But Will the Sunrise and then Till the Living End, great way to close out the album. In My Dreams, I think is overplayed to death. I'm actually bored with hearing that song now. It's so pathetic. I just don't understand it myself. Why all of a sudden I just can't get into that song like I once did. Because obviously that was the big song that really probably sold a lot of the Underlock and Key albums. You know, it's that was the song on the radio. That was the MTV classic, and but like I said, there's still just not one bad song on this album, and it's more melodic than Tooth and Nail. Yet it still has its heaviness. You know, you got like I said, Lightning Strikes Again, Till the Living End, but it's got more variety, I think, compared to Tooth and Nail is a little bit more of a heavier album, and this
Right.
one's more melodic. And that's why I like this one better. It's more melodic, and I can just get into the songs a little bit better. I mean, Jaded Heart, just a great song. Don't Lie to Me. I think I can sing this album word for word without missing a word. That's how great I love this album. Can't say that for Tooth and Nail, but Tooth and Nail is my second favorite. Under Lock and Key's my first. And yeah, there's no doubt that this was a great one to do here. Uh,
Yeah.
any thing in closing on this doc and album ranking?
Um, well, no, I mean it's great to see a band, I mean, that's been around as long as they have. With that first record, um, all the way up until the last one, and Heaven Comes Down. I mean, we got 12 really good records. Um, in the middle, obviously they jump a little bit and they're all over the place, but we did get an amazing record with Erase the Slate. And Dysfunctional. And there's a couple other, a couple that really stand up with the rest of the records, I feel. So it was really interesting sitting there and revisiting the catalog. And Dokken, unlike some of the bands, Dokken pretty much is they're Dokken. Like it's Dokken when you're hearing them. Yes, the guitar players have changed, but that's a Dokken riff or that's Don's voice. So for me, it was really interesting doing this one, and I think I learned a lot re-listening to some of these records.
Yeah. Yep, this is a solid group, no doubt, and there's always going to be, every band that I can think of that I really like. for the most part, has a bad album or two. So
Sure.
that's going to happen, and that's, obviously Don even rags on Shadow Life. There's definitely some weaker albums here, but I would say overall, Dokken, back when they were in their prime, they were definitely putting out really great albums. And unfortunately, you know, what happened on the Monsters of Rock tour, they were actually billed before Metallica at that time, and that was a big thing. A
Right.
lot of people going to that show were shocked that they had to sit through a longer Dokken set than Metallica, and some people held it against them. But for some reason, the band themselves just decided to be at each other's throats throughout the tour, and obviously that led to the dissolution of Dokken for a while until they were able to have a few years to cool off, and then better heads prevailed, and they came up with Dysfunctional, lasted till Shadow Life, and then that's the last album that George played on. Not a great way to go out in style, but at least he did come back. Played live with Don, came out for that. He was doing a lot where he would come out and play the final three songs during the encore, and the place just went nuts. So I mean, at least they gave the people what people wanted to see, and I feel that's a good way to finish it off. I mean, better than nothing. That's the way
Oh
I
yeah.
look at it.
For sure.
All right, very good. Well,
Awesome.
thanks for coming aboard for this episode, and
For having me.
yeah, we got more coming. Stay tuned. We're going to be doing a Buffalo band. We're going to rank their songs. Stay tuned.